Hey PCI, I hope you're all having a blessed Lenten season. And today I have the privilege of talking to you all about one of the 7 deadly sins. And I'm here to talk to you about envy. Now, it's funny because out of all the 7 deadly sins, envy seems to get the least amount of attention. And I think the reason being is because a lot of people, many Christians, sort of assume envy is the least harmful out of all the other sins. It's the most subtle. When it comes to envy, we know to not be envious of the big things. Like when we look at someone else's life, we know not to be envious of their car or their house, right? We know those things, but the thing about envy is there's degrees to it, right? So what about when you're standing online at Starbucks and the person in front of you is the last person to get the last blueberry muffin? Right? That feeling you feel on the inside where it's like, I was so close, right? That person could have been me. I could have had that blueberry muffin. Okay? In a sense, that is envy, but we don't pay it much attention because it's so subtle and it's come and gone before we even realize, but it was there. Those moments where maybe your neighbor's child makes the honor roll or your neighbor's child gets into that good school, that good college, and your kid got passed over. Okay? That feeling you feel where it's sort of like, well, what about my kid? Right? What about my family? Or what about you personally, right? When you get passed over at your job and someone else gets that raise or someone else gets that opportunity. You see, we all come across these moments where our hearts kind of feel the temptation to be envious, right? And because it's so prevalent, and it's actually all around us much more than we realize, it can be that much more dangerous in its subtlety. Yeah, and I think the Bible understands this actually about the nature of envy. Apostle Paul writes about it in Galatians chapter 5, where he compares envy to the likes of sexual immorality and drunkenness and idolatry and sorcery. And you're reading through this long list of sins of the flesh, and you can't help but feel like envy sounds a little bit out of place. But once again, it just goes to show there is a deeper, much more insidious root at the heart of envy or being envious of someone else. So what is that deeper heart issue? What is at the root? And I think it's this. If we were to be very honest, every instance of envy that we feel is simply reflecting a deeper dissatisfaction with our lives. And whenever we feel that way, if you take it a step further, what we're essentially saying is to God, I don't like where you have me in my life. Stated another way, God, I don't like what you're doing in my life. Stated another way, God, I don't trust how you're working things out in my life. I don't trust your plans for my life. I don't believe that you're doing this or allowing these things to happen out of love for me. I don't believe you're sovereign. And ultimately, it all boils down to, I don't believe you're God in my life. And so therefore, I now bear the right to look at someone else's life and want what they have. And you begin to see how deep, okay, this rabbit hole goes when you feel even the slightest bit of envy. And it's a deep rabbit hole, and it's actually very sinful and very dark. You know, I remember there was this one Christmas where my wife and I were racking our brains trying to figure out the perfect gift to get our daughter. And after a lot of debate and back and forth, we had decided this doll that she had been wanting for quite a while was the thing that we were gonna gift to her. But on top of that, we were gonna add all these extra accessories and all these extra clothes that this doll could wear. And we just felt leading up to Christmas that it was gonna be the best gift for her, the perfect gift. It would be, we envisioned in our minds her opening it up and the joy on her face. And we were just very, very happy to have bought this for her. And when Christmas Day rolled around, right, we happened to be celebrating the holidays at our families. And so she was surrounded by her cousins and everyone's opening up their gifts. And she opens up the doll, and as we suspected, she loved it. She loved it, she's playing with it. She hugs her mom and her dad saying she's grateful and it's a perfect gift. And she enjoyed that doll all for about 10 minutes. because within the next 10 minutes, her cousins, ended up opening their gifts, and one of them happened to get a doll as well, but it was a bigger doll with more accessories and brighter colors and shinier sequins. And almost as quickly as my daughter showed so much joy in seeing her doll, upon seeing her cousin's doll, she dropped her doll and immediately came over to us, my wife and I, and said, "I want that instead." Now, you can imagine just what my wife and I were feeling, especially to see all our plans quickly fall apart just because she saw the next gift, or she saw what her cousins had and suddenly decided that she wanted that instead. It was a very eye-opening moment for my wife and I, but at the same time, it revealed something really about human nature to me. Aren't we all like that sometimes? Don't we all kind of feel grateful and thankful towards the Lord whenever He blesses us, all for but 10 minutes? And then within the next 10 minutes, we're suddenly wanting something else. We're comparing and contrasting. We're dissatisfied with the reality of where God has us. Once again, it's not that different from a little girl, being envious of her cousin's Christmas gift. So what's the solution then? What's the solution now that we've learned to hopefully better identify it and see the subtle nature that it can take on in our lives? What's the solution? And I think Paul gives that to us. It can be found in the book of Philippians chapter 4, where he writes, I've learned the solution, right? The secret to being content in any circumstance, whether in plenty or in want, whether I got a full stomach or an empty stomach. I've learned the secret to being content. In other words, I've learned the secret to not compare myself to anyone else at any given moment. I've learned to just really be happy and satisfied and joyful with wherever the Lord has me. And he goes on to say, the secret is I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And before you kind of roll your eyes and say, okay, so the answer is just Jesus, because Paul is, yes, he is saying that Jesus is the answer, but it's not just this generic, well, look to Jesus and that's it. But it's learning not to look at other things or other people for your validation. It's learning to overcome and conquer and really address head on your fear of man, realizing so much of your life and identifying how much of your life is a byproduct of you trying to keep up with the Joneses, or you doing something in response to what someone else has done, and you wanting to get ahead, or you wanting to have more. And really realizing so much of where we are and how much we've accrued, how much we've built up for ourselves is a result of us not just simply being satisfied with God's work in our lives. And so when Paul says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, what Paul is saying is don't look to other people. Stop looking to other people, to create direction for your own life. But look to Christ, because at the end of the day, Jesus is the only one who actually had a life worth being envious of. When you consider that he was living in all his heavenly glory, heavenly riches, all of his majesty, and then when you consider that he literally left all of that behind, sacrificing all of it to condescend down and to break into our reality so that he could live amongst us and experience our brokenness firsthand. How he gives up that life truly worth being envious of so that he could take on our experience. It humbles you. It really begins to humble you. We see he became poor so that we might become rich in him. He became hungry so that we might be full in him. He was emptied out so that we could be poured into in him. Jesus literally gave everything up so that today, for those of us standing on the other side of the cross, we might be lacking in nothing. That we can live, yes, maybe not perfectly, but with the understanding that God has us exactly where he wants us to be. There are no deficiencies in the plans of God for your life. There's never any plan Bs. You're always on track. You're always on time. You're never behind. And if you're feeling the temptation to be envious, even over something as small as a blueberry muffin, learning to trust in God's plan for your life at any given moment, learning to fall back on his sovereignty, realizing that everything that God has done and continues to work out in your life is for your good. When you can wrap your mind around that, begin to accept that, fully immerse that into your heart, you'll begin to stop comparing yourself to other people. You'll begin to stop seeking validation from outside sources. And you'll begin to finally realize that God truly is sovereign, that God truly is good, that his hand is upon your life, that he's guiding you step by step. And in that place, you will find your peace. I just want to leave you guys with some practical advice, as we are continuing on this Lenten season and trying to avoid the pitfalls of these 7 deadly sins. As it relates to envy, I'd like to challenge you to really change up your own vocabulary even and the ways that you talk. Because so often, we'll catch ourselves saying, well, I don't have this, or I wish I could fill in the blank. And once again, that's a reflection of dissatisfaction of where God has us in life. And so instead of focusing on the things that you might not have, how about learn to change up your language, change up your vocabulary, and actually start vocally expressing things that you are thankful for, things that God is doing in your life, and just speak it out loud. God, I'm thankful that you have me in this place. God, I'm thankful for the things that you're doing in my family. God, I'm so grateful of this going on in my life. And there's a difference between understanding that and actually vocalizing it, putting it out into the atmosphere, because it can shape the way that your day goes. The other practical step I want to leave you with is something that Paul once again writes in the book of Philippians in chapter 4, where he says, fix your thoughts on things that are honorable, things that are righteous, things that are good, things that are lovely. Stop focusing so much on the lack. Stop focusing so much on the shortcomings, and really begin to get your mind and your heart around what God is actively doing. He loves you. He cares deeply for you. His hand is upon you. He has great plans for you. He has a destiny for you in Christ Jesus. Every promise is yes and amen. And I pray that as we continue on in this Lenten season, that you might believe this in faith. I bless you.